Toilet troubles are a common issue among many children with ADHD. I have talked to thousands of parents, who have been in tears because of the poop challenges with their children. And listen, I've been there as well. I know, what it's like to have a child with toileting issues, let's just say. Okay, so as we get started, that's the first thing I want you to know. It's a very common problem that a lot of people struggle with. But just because it's a common problem doesn't actually mean that it's normal. Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Welcome back to the Soaring Child podcast. Now, in today's episode, we're actually going to tackle an overlooked but incredibly important topic. Just wait for it. What my child's poop is telling me. Now, as parents, we're always monitoring our children's habits, their health, but we might not actually realize how much we can learn from their poop. Yes, poop. The color, the consistency, the frequency of your child's bowel movements can provide so many important clues about their digestive health, their nutrient absorption, and even potential food sensitivities. So in this episode, we'll discuss what to look for in your child's stool, when to be concerned, and how you can support their digestive health naturally, of course. Well, we'll also talk about the connection between the gut health and brain function, and offer you guys practical strategies you can put into place today to help your child thrive. Okay, so let's dive in. And let's find out what your child's poop is telling you. If you're new here to the Soaring Child podcast, I'm Dana Kay. I'm a board certified health and nutrition practitioner, and I specialize in helping families of kids with ADHD. Now, the first thing I want you guys to know is that if your child has sort of toilet issues, you're definitely not alone. Toilet troubles are a common issue among many children with ADHD. I have talked to thousands of parents, who have been in tears because of the poop challenges with their children. And listen, I've been there as well. I know, what it's like to have a child with toileting issues, let's just say. Okay, so as we get started, that's the first thing I want you to know. It's a very common problem that a lot of people struggle with. But just because it's a common problem doesn't actually mean that it's normal. And I want to begin this episode by breaking down the 7 different types of stool. Yes, that's right. There are actually 7 different types of stool, or to be crass, poo. Okay, I'd say poo, but a more technical term is stool. And we can look at the Bristol stool chart. The Bristol stool chart, or the Bristol stool scale, is a medical aid designed to classify feces into 7 groups. I know this is a pretty gross topic, guys, but it's so important. Now, you can use the Bristol stool chart to check what your child's stools are telling you. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the Bristol stool chart right here on the screen. And if you're listening instead of watching, we have a copy of the Bristol stool chart that we will include in the show notes. So check that out for more information. Type 1 to 2, stool type 1 to 2 indicates constipation. Type 3 to 4 are ideal stools as they are easier to pass. Type 5 to 7 may indicate diarrhea or urgency. And you can use this chart to compare your child's stools and see if they are having healthy bowels or unhealthy ones. So that's one really great tool you can use to get an idea of your child's gut health. But there are additional tools that I'm going to share with you in this episode, so definitely stick around. Now, a gut transit test is a second really great tool that shows how quickly or, how slowly food travels from the mouth through our digestive system before it's actually eliminated through bowel movements. And this test can be really great. It's really eye-opening because it can really show you if food is moving too slowly through the digestive stool, possibly indicating an imbalance of, say, the gut bacteria or a buildup of toxins, or if food is moving too quickly through the system, possibly indicating that the body's actually not absorbing nutrients like it should be. Now, you might be wondering, why is the state of the gut important, especially in regards to our children with ADHD? And that's because of the gut-brain connection. You may have heard me talk about it a lot. Probably one of the most important things that we need to understand, that our brains are deeply connected to our guts. And if our guts aren't sort of functioning well, our brains won't be able to function well either. ADHD symptoms can become worse when the gut isn't functioning properly. So, we want to know what we can do to help reduce ADHD symptoms naturally. We want to improve the gut health, okay? So this test, along with the Bristol stool chart I mentioned a moment ago, are great places to start. I especially love this particular test because it can be done at home anytime and for pretty much no cost at all. Just the cost of 1 cup of corn, okay? So I'm going to explain how to do it. You want to eat 1 cup of organic non-GMO corn away from any other food by at least 1 hour. It should be relatively simple to do, especially for our children. Okay, step number 2 is you want to write down what time you ate it. Then step number 3, when you have a bowel movement, watch for those corn kernels. When you see those corn kernels, write down the time of the bowel movement. Step 4, compare the time that you ate the corn to the time that you went to the toilet and saw it in there. You want to note how many hours have passed. Now, step 5 is optional. You can repeat this test a few times over the course of a month to really get that average time, because there's a couple of things that can affect it. And so doing it a couple of different times really can get you that average time over the course of the month. This average will be much more accurate than sort of that one standalone test. As I mentioned, there are variables that can really affect how quickly food moves through the body. Now, you might be wondering, well, what's the ideal time that it takes for the corn to go from the mouth all the way out into the toilet? This is probably a really important question. So the amount of time from when you eat to when food exists in sort of exits the body is ideally between 12 to 24 hours. Okay, less than 12, your body is likely not absorbing enough of the nutrients from your food, and more than 24 could mean that you're constipated or battling one of the other issues mentioned that I talked about above. So you've done the test. Now what? Okay, you know the transit time. If you have slow transit time, meaning that it's over that 24 hours, few things at home you can do to improve that slow transit time would be drinking more water, okay? Eating foods that are rich in fiber, exercising more, and working to improve the diet. So like eating more whole, nutrient-dense foods and healthy fats, and eating less processed foods. Magnesium citrate. And, this can be really beneficial. Okay, that's another good one. You want to. There's no sort of amount that I'm going to tell you here on this podcast. Obviously, speak to your healthcare practitioner to determine that. But usually, you want to start low and slow, and then move up to bowel tolerance once you can get that moving through a little bit quicker. Because pooping is so important. Okay, you want to be doing it 1 to 2 times a day. Now, slow transit time is not normal, okay? It's not normal. It's very common, but it's not normal. And it could be the result of an underlying hidden stressor like a parasite or a bacterial overgrowth. So you might want to consider a more in-depth gut test for your child. My team and I would be definitely happy to chat with you about this. I'm going to pop a link to book a free call in the comments or show notes. So check that out. Now, what about if you've got that fast transit time. Less than that 12 hours. Transit time that is too fast is also problematic. As I mentioned earlier, it can lead to nutritional deficiencies. It can also indicate a more serious condition. My recommendation is to contact your doctor if you believe your transit time was too fast. You'll want to rule out any acute digestive issues with them. Other things that can help are improving the diet, eating more fiber, and taking a good quality probiotic. Now, not all probiotics are created equal. Probably should do a podcast episode on probiotics. That's a good one. I've got to note that one down somewhere in the back of my memory. But now, okay, you might be wondering, what if you take a look at the Bristol stool chart and do this gut transit test and suspect that your child is having gut issues? I think this is a really great question. Now, for many children with ADHD, persistent poo and gut problems are caused by leaky gut, or intestinal permeability is sort of the technical name. Let's call it leaky gut. I think it's so much easier to pronounce. What is leaky gut? Okay, well, I'm going to explain to you. Now, leaky gut is probably one of the most common underlying stresses that I see in families that I work with. That's because there's a very close connection, as I mentioned earlier, between the gut and the brain. And one of the first signs of disconnect in the brain is a gut that's not functioning well. And that's because of the two-way chemical messages or communication between the two. So when something is not working properly with one, then the other will not be functioning well either. The brain has many areas that are involved in gut function, but one of the main areas is the frontal lobe. And you can see me pointing, if you're watching on YouTube, to the middle of my forehead. If you're not watching YouTube, just know that I'm pointing to the middle of my forehead. Now, the frontal lobe, it talks to the gut via nerve branches and those two-way chemical messengers. Now, as you might be aware or not aware, children and adults with ADHD generally have a weak frontal lobe, which also compromises these messages. So ensuring the gut is functioning well gives your child's frontal lobe the best opportunity to function well. The frontal lobe is involved in things like attention and focus, executive function, planning, organizing, problem solving, which are common symptoms that most of our ADHD kids suffer with. But did you know that the gut is also responsible for making 95% of our serotonin and 50% of our dopamine, which are our happy, feel-good neurotransmitters or hormones in our body that help regulate our emotions? They maintain our mood balance and they help our cognitive function. Again, these are areas that most kids with ADHD have problems with. So it makes sense that if the gut isn't functioning well, then these neurotransmitters would be affected and our children would struggle even more. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about, the gut, the mucosal barrier, okay? The mucosal barrier connects the stomach and the large intestine, and it's pretty long. It runs about 22 feet long. And when it's functioning well, it absorbs about 90% of our nutrients from the food that we eat, and it transports water and nutrients and vitamins into our cells, which we need to function well. And when this mucosal barrier isn't functioning well, it can actually increase the toxic load in our body. Okay, so this mucosal barrier, it has a single layer of cells called enterocytes, and that line the barrier. These are held together by really tight junctions whose main function is to actually keep particles from getting through. There are also these little finger-like things called microvilli that absorb the nutrients that keep us healthy. Basically, the mucosal barrier's job is to keep the bad guys out, the bacteria, the viruses, and then to let the good guys in, those nutrients that we were talking about. It also takes all of those macronutrients, so carbs, fats, protein that we eat, and it digests them and it converts them into micronutrients so that they can be absorbed by the villi and they can deliver them to the bloodstream and into our cells. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, nothing larger than this micronutrient size should be able to get through. Okay, so we have our defense system to protect our body. Now, can you imagine what would happen if these defense systems are not functioning properly? It can compromise nutrient absorption, but it can also allow these nasty toxins and bacteria to leak into the bloodstream. In other words, you can start to have something called leaky gut. Okay. And so for those watching on YouTube, you will see on the screen leaky gut progression, an image. For those that are tuning in on your favorite podcast platform, we are going to put the link for you to download this image. So at the top, you will see that we have these nasties, these stress, the toxins, parasites, bad bacteria, system malfunctions. And if these are there on a constant basis, it can trigger inflammation and it can damage the mucosal barrier. Okay, then we get breakdown of those tight junctions between those enterocytes that I mentioned that allow all of these nasties to leak through. And the more onslaught it receives, the larger the holes and the larger the molecules can leak into your system. Hopefully this makes sense. As I said, these images do help. So if you are tuning in, go and download them. And so you can view it. Now, normally when you don't have holes in your lining of your gut, basically when we eat food, our gut breaks down that food into those micronutrient-sized particles, as I mentioned, and those particles go through the lining of our gut into our cells. And that's what gives us the nutrients so we can function optimally. But when leaky gut is present, when we eat food, even the healthiest food, before the gut has had a chance to break it down, it can go through the holes in the gut into our bloodstream. Now, the way the body is designed is that when something foreign goes into the bloodstream, it recognizes it as a foreign object and it turns on this inflammatory response, this immune response. Now, if you think about this, if that large molecule is something super healthy, a large food macronutrient or protein, then your immune system might actually start sending signals to create this inflammatory response, this immune response. And then it actually starts creating antibodies and it starts attacking it. And the body has a really great memory. So anytime you eat that again, your immune system sees it as dangerous. It attacks it again. It creates more inflammation, and that inflammation continues to further break down the lining of the gut. Okay, now all of this is resulting in food intolerances, and these food intolerances continue to wreak havoc on the gut until they are removed. So it's this vicious cycle. Something started leaky gut. Okay, we showed you what can cause it above, those toxins, the medicine, parasites. Then leaky gut causes food intolerances, and the food intolerances continue to cause leaky gut. So in order to heal the gut, you must remove these foods and obviously what caused the leaky gut in the first place, or these foods or things are going to continue to break down the lining of the gut and you're not going to be successful. Now, to add fuel to the fire, all of these invaders that are causing this inflammation actually then cause the villi, those microvilli, little finger-like things, to shrink and become blunted and flattened out. So you can actually get nutrient deficiency and vitamin deficiency because so much of the minerals and vital nutrients can't actually be absorbed now. And even the healthiest foods aren't able to be absorbed. So that brings me to this question. How do you know if your child might have leaky gut? Okay, leaky gut can affect the whole body. I'm going to just list out some symptoms that can come with it, and you'll see that it's not that obvious that it's leaky gut. You can have skin issues like acne, itchy skin, eczema, dermatitis, thyroid issues, joint pain, weight loss or gain, fatigue, sleeping issues. You can have stomach problems like abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, You can have coughs or asthma or frequent colds, so immune issues. You can have ADHD symptoms, autism, sensory processing, anxiety, brain fog, which is basically inattention. If your child has any of those symptoms, it's possible leaky gut could be to blame. And leaky gut can trigger all of these things, can trigger and exacerbate ADHD symptoms. That hyperactivity, that emotional dysregulation. Okay. If it goes on too long, you can also get autoimmune diseases. So you can see that it's actually not always obvious that it's connected to leaky gut. Now, there's a lot of information. Don't want you to get scared. You've got this information. When we know better, we do better. We can do something about it. So I'm going to share what can we do about it. There are a couple of ways to address leaky gut, and one of those is diet. Super simple, okay? We eat food every day. Diet is the foundation of any plan. You can try to reduce inflammation in the body and the gut through the removing foods that inflame it. Those are those food sensitivities that I talked about, but also gluten, dairy, soy, avoiding refined sugars, processed meats, junk food, sauces, artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, sugary beverages, okay? But remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to take everything out all at once, one step at a time. But I think more than that, it's really important to focus on all the great things you can and should be eating. You really want to bring in whole, nutritious, micronutrient-rich fruits and veggies, grass-fed animal proteins such as meat, poultry, wild-caught seafood, eggs, sprouted seeds and nuts, gluten-free grains, gluten-free oats, buckwheat, rice, sorghum. You want to add in fermented vegetables, okay? You might be going, well, how am I going to get my kid to eat fermented vegetables? You want to just start small. Just start with a bit of the liquid, okay? I'm just going to list out some of those fermented vegetables. You can get sauerkraut or kimchi, things like that. But you can also ferment carrots. You can ferment cucumbers, okay? So things that they may eat a little bit more than, say, kimchi. You want to drink plenty of spring water, gut healing bone broth. Oh my gosh, it's so easy and cheap to make that at home. Smoothies, kombucha. Eat plenty of healthy fats like avocado, coconut, olive oils, and then choose organic, non-GMO food where possible, because those pesticides and things like that can actually further break down the gut. Now, the other way to help improve leaky gut is through functional lab testing to identify, really dig deep into what might have caused the leaky gut in the first place. The first test would be a stool test. It basically looks at the state of the gut. It looks for what could have caused the leaky gut in the first place. Parasites, bacteria, worms, yeast overgrowth. It also looks at some of those intestinal health markers. I actually like something called the wheat zoomer, okay? This gives me a good understanding if they've got leaky gut without doing a stool test, but it also gives you the level of reactivity to wheat and gluten, and it also has those great leaky gut markers in it as well, okay? Not all gut tests are created equal. The one that you may get from, a traditional pediatrician won't really give you the information you need. Another test you can look at is a food sensitivity panel. Okay. As I said before, you need to remove the food intolerances out of the diet and work on healing the gut at the same time. We can really start to see some of those symptoms improving. But also, your child's poop will start to improve as well. Now, these tests look for inflammatory reactions to the body to certain foods. But again, important thing to remember is food sensitivities, not all tests are created equal, okay? Really important that you go with a quality one. I like the food zoomers and the food sensitivity panels from Vibrant Wellness. They're my favorite. I want to also say that food sensitivities, they're not true allergies. But as I showed you or talked to you about today, they do cause inflammation. So you can actually heal from them. Once you heal the gut, you can start to add those foods back in. Okay. I love the wheat zoomer because it gives you that gluten, wheat, and those leaky gut markers, as I mentioned. Okay. Now, I do suggest other tests as well. Another one is an organic acid test. I actually prefer the organic acid test over, say, a stool test because it gives us more bang for our buck. It's got some great gut markers in there. It's got, candida. It's got some mold markers. It's got some bacterial markers, but it gives you so much information as well. So that's probably one of my favorites, along with the wheat zoomer because it has those specific leaky gut markers. There are many other tests that we do with the families that we work with, but those ones specifically relate to the gut and, the stool and what can be contributing to leaky gut and to your child's symptoms. Once we get results back, really going in with that targeted bio-individual plan for your child, those lifestyle changes, those dietary modifications, and targeted supplementations based on those lab tests. You probably hear me say a lot. When it comes to supplementation, there really is no one-size-fits-all approach. Supplementation should be tailored to each individual in order to address what's going on in their body. Some children, they might be helped by nutritional supplements targeting certain minerals and vitamins because they're not able to absorb them in their leaky gut. But for others, it might show no effect. So I always really strongly recommend before considering supplementation that you address diet first, along with specific functional lab testing to identify those things that are going on in your child's body. So I think that wraps up today's episode. I want to thank you for joining me today. We really dug deep into the world of gut health and what your child's poop can reveal. We covered 2 practical at-home tools that you can use to monitor your child's gut health. It was the Bristol stool chart, which helps you identify the different types of stool, and the DIY gut test, simple way to really assess for any visible signs of gut issues. We also discussed the concept of leaky gut and how it can impact your child's ADHD symptoms. And to dig deeper, we explored a couple of functional lab tests as well that can really provide you a more detailed insight into your child's gut health. Now, these tests can really help identify underlying issues that may not be visible with these at-home tools that I suggested. If you want to learn more how you can really support your child's gut health and reduce ADHD symptoms naturally, definitely we'd like to offer you to book a free call with our team. You'll find those links in the comments or the show notes below. Our team of experts are really here to guide you on this journey to better health for your child to help them thrive. Listeners, thanks for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.